name is Dr. LeVar Javon Charleston. I am the Assistant Director and Senior Research Associate at Wisconsin's Equity and Inclusion Laboratory, and also the Director of the Graduate School Academy. And so what we aim to do here today is to provide some additional information, insight, some value nuggets into your preparation for, your application to, as well as your navigation through graduate school. And so I'm honored to have a few experts here as it relates to some of these issues that we're going to talk about today, and they're going to be presenting to you throughout the day. But before we delve too deep into this introduction, and again, for this introduction, I'm just going to touch on a couple of things that you're going to be hearing throughout the day. So some of the things may be repetitive, but you should get some more in-depth information as we move on throughout the day. But thumb test question, and thumb test question means if you agree, thumbs up. If you're not sure, thumbs to the side. If it's a negative, thumbs down. So thumb test question of the day. How many of you are interested in going to graduate school? Thumbs up. Some are not sure. Nobody's sure they're not going to graduate school. Oh, we do. He said, okay, we see that, right? And so we're going to explore this question a little bit later as we move throughout the program. So what I'm going to talk about briefly for about half an hour is basically give an introduction to whether or not asking the question, is graduate school the right choice for me? We're going to talk about positioning yourself for graduate school, networking your way to success. Today there's going to be a lunch keynote. Again, this is agenda for the entire academy. The application process, choosing the right institution and alternatives, and then we'll close with some closing thoughts, some questions, and some discussion. And so the first thing you need to think about, I think, when we're talking about graduate school is considering graduate school. When is a good time to research graduate school options? And I argue the research now, right? The research process can be long, in-depth. You can be unsure, but it's several steps in the process, and you can start as early as your freshman year in college. And we'll talk more about that, and others will talk more about that throughout the day. But research is broken down to several different aspects, and we need to start thinking about it that way. So then why attend graduate school, right? So there's personal reasons. You may want to meet certain career goals, and some of that may require a graduate or professional degree. And I'm saying graduate school loosely, but I'm including professional school as well. And so you may want to advance your degree to seek knowledge, personal fulfillment, or seek a career change. So oftentimes folks go to undergraduate and you major in a certain major, and you may go to graduate school to major in something different. And then oftentimes there are program majors that are not offered as undergraduate majors, but are offered only as graduate majors. So I think of the field of student affairs, right? Typically that doesn't happen in the undergraduate curriculum. Then there are practical reasons, right? So more opportunities, career mobility, marketing yourself, more money, right? Whereas several years ago, quite a few years ago, you had a leg up on the competition by having a bachelor's degree. More often than not, there are those who are highly educated that are going to be competing with you, right? So they may have advanced degrees. In order to market yourself accordingly, you may need to have advanced degrees to be competitive with them. And then, is it really worth it? You talk about graduate school, and in some fields, you can make quite a bit of money and make a good living for yourself without graduate degrees. But the statistics break down a little bit like this, right? And so we see here, what's very interesting to me, I'm going to point this out initially, the more they learn, the more they earn. You look at, typically we think of the salary as a gap between black, white, male, female, gender, and ethnicity or specific. But when you look at the median annual salaries by race, ethnicity, gender, and education level, at the most advanced degree level right here, white males who typically make more than any other demographic group, and black males are very, very close. I think there's a difference of about $2,000 here or so like that. And that's close to the $80,000, where am I? $80,000 mark. I mean, $70,000 mark. Where am I? Oh, that's Asian male, I'm sorry. Where am I? There we are, sorry. There and there, all right? And it's very close. But you see, as the graduate, as the degree level, the lower the graduate degree level, the less money people are making as it relates to income, right? So is it worth it? Some would argue yes, some would argue no, right? It depends on your quality of life and what you deem, quality of life. And so while I'm grouping graduate and professional schools together, there is a difference there, right? So professional degree of males, right? This is all males, this is all females. We're looking at about $116,000, right? For professional degrees. Doctoral degrees about $106,000. And we see a gender discrepancy right here, right? Obviously, for a professional degree for females, $94,000. I mean, we still got a lot of work to do with that glass ceiling as it relates to women and equity in that regard. But the bottom line here, bachelor's degree, is this over the lifespan, right? And with professional and doctoral degrees, master's degrees, your income level rises. So how do we know if it's the right time to go to graduate school, right? And so you consider the following. I'd argue your career goals, long-term versus short-term goals. Your current situation, is it feasible as it relates to your family, finances? How can you afford it? And we'll talk more about these things again. This is just to wet your whistle of things to come throughout the day. And your desired lifestyle, work-life balance, autonomy versus structure. One of the reasons why I got a PhD is because I wanted to be able to ask my own questions and answer those questions, as well as have autonomy to be able to do the things that I wanted to do and not necessarily be on a 9 to 5. Now, I might work longer than that regularly, right? But if I needed to go somewhere or do something, I do feel like I have that autonomy in my current position, right? And so there's this big dichotomy. There's these questions around, everyone says, some folks say go to work first, and some degrees require that you do that. And we'll talk more about that later, but you can obtain some of that experience that's necessary while you're in actually undergraduate. But some advantages, right? Some advantages to go graduate school first and working later, right? You're in the habit of being a student. Routine is familiar. One thing that happened to me when I came back to school, and particularly taking classes around statistics, and I hadn't touched math in 10 years, it was pretty challenging, right? And so your study and taste-taking skills are fine-tuned if you go straight to graduate school. You may not have major family homework commitments, as you move further in life, and some folks start earlier than others, but you have family, kids, things of that nature, other careers that may get in the way of you pursuing graduate school. Some career paths require advanced degrees even for entry-level opportunities, right? So social work, physical therapy, occupational therapy, most medical and law degrees require advanced degrees. So if you want to do some of those things, those are advantages to going to school first and working later. Disadvantage, though, you may be feeling burnt out from undergrad. And if you feel like me, you're just ready to be done, right? And you could benefit from a break. Putting your earning potential on hold for 2 or more years could result in increased debt. And debt is a real issue, and we'll talk more about this as we go along as well, too. But because loans are one of the things that could help finance graduate school, but debt is one of those things to consider as it incurs, right? You may not know the exact degree you want to pursue and won't have time to explore the field for a perfect degree. I do have friends who you start graduate school in a program for 5 years, decide they don't like it, switch to another program. We all, at least my colleagues and I, we know folks like that. And that could be a big waste of time, big waste of money. So those are some disadvantages. But what about going to work first and going to graduate school later? Some advantages. You can gain relevant experience and clarify your career goals. You can earn money to help pay for school or work for an employer who offers educational benefits. When I first decided to go to graduate school, I was actually working on a business degree, and I did that because my company was the company that I was paying for, that I was working for, offered to pay for that, right? And so those are some things that can happen for you that they may be beneficial and advantages. And then you spend time gaining experience, which enhance the competitiveness of your application. When I came to the education side of academia, or when I came to education, I had experience as an assistant director of admissions, which really looked good on my resume when I was applying for graduate school. And I probably argue, to be truthful, because of my test scores, it probably weighed more heavily that I had that position, which is one of the reasons why I think I got in. Disadvantages. May take a while to get back into the routine of being a student, writing papers, taking tests, having homework, When you get done with that, you really don't want, I mean, I argue that, that in life you want to be learning all the time, but you probably get more used to learning on your own time and your own way and not taking a test to satisfy your professor, which often occurs, right? So you have a certain writing style and your professor just rips it up, and then you have to change and alter what you do in order to get the grade out of the class. Some people argue that you shouldn't do that, but for those who have gone to graduate school, you may have had some similar experience. I definitely did throughout my trajectory. You may have additional family, home, job responsibilities that were not present in your undergraduate days that create unique time management challenges, right? And so thinking about these things, I mean, you have to weigh that on your own, right? There's pros and there's cons, and you got to think about your own situation and your trajectory and what you want for your own future. And so then you may ask, what are your options for graduate school? Again, just wetting your whistle of some things that are more to come today. Professional schools includes dental, medical, veterinary, law, paralegal, and business schools, and some others. Master's programs, typically 1 to 2 years full-time if you go full-time. And so some of the advantages that was not on the previous slide is that it may only take you an additional year to get where you want to get, depending on what you want to do, and depending on what program and what institution you go to. So these are some of their options for master's programs. Typically it takes 1 to 2 years if you go there full-time. Doctoral programs arguably takes a lot more time, 5 to 8 years, depending on the program. You have a doctorate of education and a doctor of philosophy in several different fields. Okay, and so then the question becomes, how do you choose a graduate school? And again, we're going to be touching more in depth on these as we move forward. But these are some things to consider. Your geographic location, your geographic area, your desired location versus in-state versus out-state, the cost, travel expenses, and if it's a specific target job area, right? So if you want to go to Silicon Valley and you want to be in IT, that's a great place to be. Or even like Washington State, it's a good place to be for that type of work. Experiential learning, professional practical experience. You get hands-on learning, right? And so some programs have internships, requirements, and not only are they good for your learning and it's required for your graduation, but a lot of times, or sometimes I'd rather say, it gives you an opportunity to have immediate employment upon graduation if you do a good job at these sorts of internships, right? So reputation, are the programs you're looking at accredited? And sometimes we may think that that's not important, but definitely depending on what area you're going to, it really can have a huge bearing on where you go to work after graduate school, right? And so we'll talk more about that as we move on throughout the day, throughout the academy, but that's going to be important too. And then the quality, consider the quality of the academic courses, the library, the equipment of labs, the advising system, et cetera. So all of these things, right, when we talk about the research process and we talk about when you should start researching this stuff, right? Some of this stuff can be done now as you're moving into understanding more what you want to do, or even not understanding what you want to do, but knowing that you want to go to graduate school. These are some things to think about, and even the areas that you may be interested in, it may be worth exploring different institutions that may be ideal for you to go to. Again, consider demographics and culture. And so for some people, it's really important that you're in a place where you feel welcomed, where you're in the place where there's cultural activities that can enrich you and keep and help make you a whole person, because there are a lot of places where that's not there, right? Particularly, many of you are Ohio State. We have some Wisconsin people in here. Anybody in here from HBCU? Okay, so HBCU here. Anybody? No?
2 years.
Okay, 2 years. Right, and so another important thing to think about is depending on what area you go into, there are some programs where even if you get accustomed to the support and the structure that HBCUs offer, if you want to go further, they may not have those sorts of programs in those types of institutions. So I can think of computer sciences. I do some work in broadening participation in STEM in general, and computer science in particular. And I think as of last year, there are only 3 programs at HBCUs that have doctoral level computing science related programs, right? So that means that you're going to be at a place that's predominant, that's not, accustomed, that you're not accustomed to. And so you have to think about that. It's important for some people, like, so that may go into how and where you choose to go to graduate school. Publications and research faculty. Do you wish to study or conduct research under a particular expert in the field who teaches at a specific institution? If you're familiar with research, then there may be some individuals who are highly sought after, highly reputable, and these folks are at academies, right? And and sometimes they're more tangible than you think, right? And so you may want to think about that, and if you know a particular person where you want to study under, that may be a compelling factor for choosing a particular graduate school. Requirements. How many credit hours or years is the program? Does it require comprehensive finals or research and a thesis? Right, and that can be huge, right? Say you don't like writing, right? Or say, for instance, you want to go to graduate school, but you are fearful that it may take 8 years. There are actually some programs that take less than other programs, even in the same institution. I'll give you an example. At the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I had a colleague when I was in graduate school, which is interesting because she's still in graduate school, and I graduated quite a bit ago. And we were wrestling with around the same question, right, in research. But her major was educational psychology study, or ed policy studies, I think it was. And mine was educational leadership and policy analysis. I finished in 5 years. She's still there, and I've been out for about 5 years, right? So that, it depends on the program, it depends on the advisor, it depends on a number of things that you must consider, and these are the things that you want to be researching now, and that may take a bit of time as you're preparing to go throughout your educational and occupational trajectory. So preparation, placement record. What types of positions have previous graduates of the program gone on to, right, to hold, right? And sometimes you might not think about that, right? But like, okay, so is this, Harvard education, right? Well, where are they going to work afterwards, right? And if they're working in places, or one I can think about is like Columbia Law, right? Most folks who come out of Columbia Law go into corporate law. It's a breeding ground for corporate lawyers. If you don't want to do corporate law, but their whole program is centered around that, then that might not be the place for you, no matter the fact that it might be a reputable institution, right? So you may want, there are some law schools, for example, that breed scholars, and then there's some that breed practitioners. So I use this big rival in the state of Wisconsin, Marquette versus UW Law. And it's a huge rivalry. And Marquette argues that they produce lawyers and practitioners, and they argue that University of Wisconsin-Madison Law School produces those who are, thinkers and theorists and go on to other occupations in law that's not necessarily practicing in the courtroom. And whether that's true or not, that could be argued, but that's the perception. So what type of institution, like what type of placement record, where are you going to go after you finish? And so there's a lot of things to consider here, right? And so we're throwing a lot of information at you, and if you guys have extra questions after we're done here, how am I doing on time? I'm okay? Okay. Then we could talk about some of those things, but you may have a lot of your questions answered throughout this thing. I'm excited about the staff that we have who are going to be presenting you today. So, with all these things in mind, how do you narrow your choices, right? And so there are a few ways, practical ways, and this is not by any means an exhaustive list, right? But it is some things that you may consider, right? Talk to alumni of the programs you're considering, right? It's hugely important, and sometimes you can sort of look on the websites and see who's in that program. They may be in a similar organization that you're in, and we'll do some more on networking later on that would help with this process as well. And then understanding the curriculum, looking at the classes they have to offer, trying to figure out, oftentimes professors have their syllabi online, so you can see the books that they're given in class, and you can get a head start on some of that stuff, or you can browse it to see if it's something that you're interested in. Stay up to date with graduate school requirements. They do change. I'll give you an example. When I first, and this was a blessing for me because I'm a pretty good writer, and when I came to my graduate program, my first year, they offered, in place of a qualifying exam, which is generally a couple of questions that you have to answer that many people, that serves as a barrier for many people who are trying to graduate from graduate school. A lot of people don't pass their qualifying exams. They offered us in place, and my colleague Emily Hofacker could probably attest to this too. We were in the master's program together. They offered in place of that, if you wrote a publishable article, it could serve in place of your qualifying exam. And I was like, are you serious? I mean, because one, for what I wanted to do, I need to publish anyway, right? So why would I take some tests that I can't use, right? And so once we get to graduate school, we'll start talking more about that, but the work that you're doing needs to count for more than one thing. Like a class assignment shouldn't be a class assignment just for the sake of a class assignment. I talk to my students all the time, right, and who work in the lab, graduate students all the time. Like if you have an assignment for your class, it needs to be serving as a literature review for a thesis or a dissertation. You need to be trying to publish it, depending on what you want to do. If you want to go into the academy, then you're trying to publish it. And so we want your work to serve for more than one purpose. Now you have to be ethical with it, so you can't be something else then come and turn it in as a class assignment. But your class assignment can be turned into something else and serve another purpose, right? And so they changed, and so I got to do that, and it was wonderful. Like I mean, it took a huge level of apprehension off of me. So keep up with that. I mean, some places don't require the GRE. I'm jumping ahead, but I mean, those are things to consider, right? But you need to know. If you don't know what you don't know, and if you don't know, then you're at a disadvantage, right? So talk to your current department faculty and academic advisors. They often have information about programs of study at other institutions, right? And I was talking to, who was I talking to? Someone earlier today about no one ever really talking to me about graduate school, right? Sometimes when you're a person of color, folks overlook you, right? And they don't think you're interested, right? But if you show some interest and some initiative on your own, and you don't necessarily have to be a person of color, like anybody, it depends on the type of advisor that you have. Right? They may just advise you with your stuff, but if you're interested in that, if they don't know how to advise you, ask them, or if you feel like they're not advising you sufficiently, ask them to refer you to someone else who maybe can. Or ask your trusted ally, whether it's a faculty member or staff from whatever department, who you could probably tap into to talk about some of your interests. Like a lot of times people don't know what we're interested in, and you may not be sure about what you're interested in, and I have another story that I'll talk about, a personal story later on about that as we talk about networking. But these are things that can help you narrow your choices. Visit the websites of graduate schools, request graduate catalogs. You could do that, right? You could do, these people are tangible. You can walk into a graduate program, talk to the student personnel officer there, and get a bunch of questions answered. Right? It may be even at your own institution. It may be just about the field. And maybe you don't want to go to Ohio State for this particular thing, but maybe you have questions about that area. So you can go to the graduate department at your institution and request information about that area. All these things help you narrow your choices. Contact the department chair in your chosen field. Now they're really busy, so you might send an email or something, you might not get one back. But that's something that you can do. Some are very responsive to students. Some care about students. And so they may be more responsive, but these are ways, again, to help narrow your choices. Visit as many campuses as possible. Call ahead for an appointment with the graduate advisor. You can schedule this at any time. Maybe something you don't know, right? You don't think about. I never thought about that as an undergraduate. Like I can call somebody at this school and schedule an appointment to talk about this program, right? And that thing serves two purposes, particularly if you're interested in that program at that school, right? They know who you are, right? And if you make a good impression, then they will, they can speak volumes for you. And in my particular program that I graduated from and I currently teach at the University of Wisconsin, that student services personnel person is the most valuable person in that department. Is the most valuable. I mean, I'm talking about over the chair, like they can make things happen, right? And so you build those relationships. You start early and you start often. Build those relationships. It may give you, help you to narrow your choices. Trust your gut. Remember how you knew your undergraduate school choice was right for you, or how you experience now that it was the wrong choice for you, right? I don't have that on here, but sometimes we choose schools because our friends go there. The school has a decent reputation. It's the flagship school at our school, but it might not be the right fit, right? So all these things in this entire research process is helping you to establish fit and helping you to narrow your choices, right? We're going to talk more about this, and we have a whole session on this later, but what about the admissions process? Research, right? Do research about it. Some places don't require GRE anymore. You know how wonderful that would be to me, right? Like there's a lot of apprehension that goes with these standardized tests, right? There's also, I'm a researcher by trade, right? So there's also research that tells that standardized tests don't predict your success rates. But it's one of the few measures that they have for admissions, so they're still very much used at most institutions, right? But see what those tests are, you know, MCAT, GRE, LSAT, all those things, because they may require prepping, and they may require prepping sooner rather than later. You know, I'm honestly blessed to be where I am today because I took the GRE twice, didn't study for it either time, and did horribly on it both times, right? But, you know, no one was telling me anything, right? But I guess in retrospect, I should have been inquiring about that. I should have been reading. I should have been doing research about this stuff, right? So I'm blessed to be here, but research now and often, right? Undergraduate transcripts, GPA, and college courses. So some programs that you may be interested in may require prerequisite courses. How do you know if you don't check out those programs, right? So, you know, so I know a bunch of students who are interested in other programs, and they have to take prerequisite courses just to get in that program after you're already done with your undergrad, when you can sort of finish that or get that completed if you know where you want to go and what's required, right? So you need to know about that admissions program, your program application, knowing what it entails. If you're a horrible writer, then you might want to start on your statement early. Talk to somebody who's trusted, go to the writing center, have everyone. It's another thing I didn't do. I mean, a lot of this stuff that I do and the research on and I present, it's horrible mistakes that I made. Like, I graduated ultimately with a public relations and marketing degree. I'm a great writer. I don't need anyone to look at my statement, right? Wrong, because people are looking for specific things, and unless you know what they're looking for, you don't know, right? And you can be the greatest writer in the world. I've been on a admissions committee where we've turned down people who graduate from Harvard, Columbia, Yale. Happens regularly, right? Because you went into a big old story about yourself and didn't mention any of the points that we required you to mention on your statement, right? Know what this admission process is. Resume, CV, right? Knowing what different programs are looking for. If you're trying to get in an MBA, you're going to have 2 years. Most MBAs schools, you have to have 2 years of business experience, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to graduate to get that. It may be you may do an internship for 2 years as an undergrad, and it may satisfy those requirements. But if you don't know about the admissions process and you don't know what's required, then you may miss out on these things, right? Letters of recommendation. You need to be building relationships right now. You know, I played football in college, right? And it was commonplace for us to just sit in the class, and I say us as student athletes, sit in the class and just be, try to disappear, even though everybody knows who you are because you're an athlete, whatever, right? But how do you build relationships? How are you going to get a letter of recommendation? Like, who's going to recommend you to go to graduate school should you decide to go to graduate school, right? So you have to be building these relationships with your faculty, with staff, with people in the multicultural office, people who are reputable, people who can write you a strong letter of recommendation. And so that's why when we talk about do the research process, now that's included. So you're building these relationships from your freshman year. Now, we're not saying take the same class or the same professor all this time, but you can build a relationship with your professor in your class. I don't care if the class is a 200 seat lecture class. Okay, my time. Did you give me a warning? I didn't see anything. All right, so my time is done here, right? And we're about, we talked about tests a little bit. How can you play for graduate school? When should you begin the entire process? As soon as you can. The sooner the better. Don't rush the research process. It may take a while. All the things I named, like, I just shot a lot of stuff to you in half an hour, right? But that stuff takes years, right? To develop, it takes time to develop these relationships, to do this research. If you're like me, my undergraduate major changed 3 times, which might dictate, what you're gonna go into graduate school with. So this stuff takes time. Take your time and make solid decisions. And then if I could do it, so can you, right? A lot about graduate school, like, it takes a level of aptitude to get there, right? But it really takes perseverance. Me and Doc right here were talking about this earlier, right? It really takes perseverance, right? Yeah, but y'all all are, you at Ohio State, Morehouse, University of Wisconsin. You got what it takes. You might need to build your skills in certain areas, but you got what it takes. It's really a perseverance thing, right? And a discipline thing. So if I could do it, this guy from the hood, Detroit, Michigan, football player, turned scholar. If I could do it, and I'm not the brightest light bulb in the pack by any means, right? I'm not. Who laughed at that? But if I could do it, so can you.